to sing with live? Yeah.
We touched Tim and Veronica Bratton, Crack Clay. Our mess, his miracle. Are we live, baby? What time we went?
We're live.
There we go. Our mess, his miracle. We touch subjects that nobody wants to touch. And tonight's one of those. Okay? A man's 3 biggest sex needs. I don't know a man had 3 biggest. What is it?
You're a man.
They do.
But you're a man.
They do. We have sex needs, and not just what you think. There's sex needs in men. We tackle, you all right?
I forgot, that's right.
We tackle the subject that nobody wants to tackle. And even people get embarrassed talking about it. But maybe that's why we're in such trouble. People are scared to touch it. Soon, the Browns will be playing against the Steelers.
At what time?
Maybe there'll be more Brown fans tonight than usual since they're playing the Steelers.
At what time?
What do you think, Pumpkin?
What time?
At 8:15. So after this here, we gotta go.
Eastern time.
Eastern time. So after this here, honey, we gotta go.
Tonight.
Yeah. So tonight after this, we're headed to a Browns, Lynchburg Browns backers, and we're all gonna get together at a local restaurant and watch the Browns beat the Steelers. Who's in?
So my husband is very pumped up. We watched Liberty play basketball last night.
Yeah.
Inside the new
Flames
facility,
won.
the new basketball arena, and they won handily.
And the Browns coach is a ditto head. He loves Rush Limbaugh. He's a conservative junkie. I like that. But he won't be on the sidelines tonight because he's got COVID. But that's okay. We're still going to beat the Steelers. And I'm just telling you right now, if the Browns do win and go to the Super Bowl, we're going to have a bash right here. I'm telling you right now, we're going to have a bash downstairs in front of the big screen TV for everybody to come celebrate with us. Okay, go Browns. We love you guys, and we're no, honey, no, sweetie. That's going to be one person upstairs down. Okay, but anyway, guys, we're so excited. I just want you to know something really quick, that we are in a spiritual battle. This is a spiritual battle. Okay, it's not Trump versus Biden. All that. It's a spiritual battle, guys. I want you to know that. You know, the communist propaganda were having their way. They liked Trump. Trump was their buddy. But once Trump became president, he was slowing down the radical left socialist agenda. Demonic agenda. He was slowing that down, even trying to get to a stop. And now it's driving the left-wing radicals nuts because they want God out of America. They want to do away with him completely. They hate him. They hate my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. They want nothing to do with him. This is a spiritual battle. It's not Republican, Democrat. I love my Democrat patients and my Republican patients. They come in today and they ask me this week, you know, who are you for and all that, and I tell them. Some of them they're not all like me. But you know what we do before we leave? We hug each other. We hug each other.
It gives the
and you know what I tell them?
Good discussion.
Do you know what I tell them the most important thing is? It's not Republican, Democrat. It's Jesus. That is what it's all about. That should be our common denominator. It's all about Jesus. Yeah, I like to show them what I think and stuff, but there's nothing could be sliced so thin only has one side. Okay, so we have to love people for who they are, understand where they're coming from, okay, and help them if you like. But that's really important. But to have a relationship with Jesus, not just a superficial relationship, not a relationship where we invite him into our house and talk to him. But we need a genuine relationship with him where he comes into our heart and radically saves us. That's what we need.
Maybe not where we just want to have a dinner guest.
Someone just came in, everybody's ahead of Jacob. Okay. Everybody's ahead of Jacob. But that's what we need.
Jesus just as a dinner guest.
No, as a dinner guest.
Savior.
A lot of people just invite him over for dinner.
And like
but they don't want to
go. Bible, the Pharisees.
They don't want to go any further. They don't want to go any further. They definitely don't want to ask him into their heart and be the Lord and Savior. They just want him to be their dinner guest. Okay? Because it says something in one of our devotions this week. We're reading in Luke 12:4. Listen to this. Luke 12:4. And I say to you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body, and after that they have no more than they can do. There's nothing more they can do after they kill you. That's it for eternity. Okay, as a born-again Christian, they can't take you to hell. Humans can't do that. But I will show you whom you should fear. Fear him who, after he was killed, has power to cast into hell. Yes, I say to you, fear him. God Almighty, he's coming back not as a manger in the stable. He's coming back as a lion. Read Revelation. It says he's got his piercing eyes of judgment with a sword. He's going to smite the enemy as a fierce warrior. That's who you want to fear, who you're going to spend eternity with. Just like we're celebrating this week, we're celebrating 65 years of Jim Elliot and those wonderful missionaries who died. And they spent so much time from a plane sending down gifts, and they thought they were right to come down to meet him. They came down and met him, and these tribes killed them. Did that deter their wives from going to see them? Their wives went down and witnessed to him, and they all gave their life to Jesus, probably because they were so amazed after killing their husband that their wives came to tell them about Jesus. One of the warriors told one of their wives, he said, when we killed your husbands, there was music in the trees. And people clothed in white came down and took their bodies away. Why do we fear? As a true, genuine, born-again Christian, why do we fear death? All they can do is kill us for eternity. That's it. We just pray that you're genuinely born again and that you have a relationship with Jesus. We have something awesome that my wife's going to tell you about today. The 3 biggest needs of a husband. 3 biggest sexual needs of a husband. My wife has the talent to show this in a wonderful, professional, appropriate manner. Baby, go Browns. Ooh, Dad.
And tomorrow night, go who?
And tomorrow night go the Buckeyes. It's Ohio time. It's an Ohio time in this week.
It is. So last week we talked about the
So what's my 3 biggest sex needs?
Well, last week we talked about the 3 top sex needs of women.
Right. What were they?
They were affirmation, connection, and non-sexual touch. For men, their top 3 sex needs are mutual satisfaction.
Right.
Connection, again number 2 for both, connection, for both sexes, connection, and the 3rd one for men is responsiveness. So women, didn't you think that the top sex need for men was going to be like release, sexual release, not mutual satisfaction?
We're on Facebook.
Well, I didn't say the big O word. I'm saying it much more
Don't
diplomatically.
mention that. We're going to get
censored. I'm saying it much more diplomatically, a sexual release, because it is part of the conversation tonight. They say the word straight out in the book, all throughout. This is a Christian book.
But that's not my sexual need.
But I hope you, when we went through this book, you said these are your top 3 sexual needs, right? Mutual satisfaction, connection, and responsiveness.
But not the other one you said. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so we are doing the 5 sex needs of men and women. Discover the secrets to great sex in a godly marriage, by Dr. Gary and Barbara Rosberg.
Right.
So, as I was saying, and that men want fulfillment for their wives,
Right.
and themselves, right? They want fulfillment for their wives and themselves. And we noticed that I pointed out that the number 2 connection for both genders is connection. And just as women's top sex needs are interrelated because we're relational, the men's top 3 sex needs are interconnected. They're all about relationship, just like ours are. So let's just get the bare bones over with about the sexual release, okay? Yes, yes, men do want sexual release, but not only do they want it, they actually need it because God made them that way. What happens is, just medically speaking, testosterone builds up in their system and they have to release it. It's just a need. So God designed them, though, with a strong desire to need their wives to enjoy that experience as much as they do. So more than 67% of the men who were surveyed listed mutual satisfaction as their top sex need. And the top three, they were really close. They were all three in the 60s. Number one, mutual satisfaction was 67% of the men. Okay? So they believe a good sexual relationship is one in which both the husband and wife are experiencing satisfaction during their lovemaking. Men often find it difficult to express their needs and fears. On the inside, he desperately desires to satisfy his wife as much as he wants to feel satisfaction. And that's why he feels threatened when he thinks his wife is dissatisfied with their sex life. So satisfaction is more than just that physical release. It's the purpose of sexual satisfaction is not just that, but it's having an emotional and spiritual connection. The two of you having an emotional and spiritual connection. And so when that mutual satisfaction isn't happening, he thinks to himself, well, am I not good? What, am I capable? Can I do it well? And so when a man hears his wife say, which just kind of blows him off and say, well, you just do your thing and I'll just lay here, then he gets robbed of any self-esteem. He hears her telling him, in his mind, he's hearing her say no, that he's not good. So author Shanti Feldman, which a couple years ago we did one of her books about sex, or about men and women and their needs. It wasn't a sex book, it was about the needs of women and men. Anyway, she writes that one man told her that everyone thinks that women are more emotional than men, and everyone thinks that when it comes to sex, guys just want to do it, right? And women think there are no emotions there, but there are. And when wives say no, they're messing with all those emotions. And so their intimate sexual interlude affirms his masculinity. And when women are responsive, when they are responsive to their husband, they're saying, I love the things that make you a man. So although most men really want their wife, but we know that most men do want their wives to experience sexual pleasure, that there are those men who who are just using their wives for their own sexual release, and that is a whole other situation altogether. We're not talking about those men right now. So if you are in that kind of marriage, then maybe you need to seek some counseling. It could be a few things that he says that they say that the couple is probably experiencing other marital problems, or the man may be dealing with a deeper internal issue. Okay, the second need is connection. So nothing makes a man feel closer to his wife than being physically and emotionally connected. 66% of men said connection was their top sex need, which made it number 2 because number 1 was 67%, right? And for men, sex builds that connection for a husband in the same way that talking and helping around the house builds it for her. So connections are not very difficult to do, ladies. You can connect with your husband all day long. It doesn't take a lot, it just takes a little bit of thought. So things like, you can do things that show him that you're a priority, that he's a priority to you, and that he's important to you by just, touching his leg when you're in the car together, reaching out, holding his hand, walking up behind him and just rubbing his back. Sometimes when Tim's driving, I'll just rub his neck like this, right, while he's driving, or I'll put my hand on his knee. And playing footsies under the table and having that contact, just this little contact to say that I'm thinking about you, and make eye contact across the table, across the room when you're in public together, and let him know that you're thinking about him and you want to connect with him. And that puts a lot of tokens in his love bank, doesn't it? And so that later, you're making him feel good, and you're affirming him when you're doing that. So men desire to be understood and listened to, accepted, cared for, and encouraged, just like we women do. And when a wife seeks to learn what's important to her husband, like sports and work, and learn what his views are, and listen to his often guarded emotions, then she really helps develop that connection with him. And when she connects to her husband, she not only shows that she values the relationship, but she values him. All right? And the reason why connection improves a couple's sexual relationship is because it increases the husband's emotional dependency on his wife. His attraction towards her will increase, and he'll accept her completely. And when you have that openness and emotional trust in your marriage, then it helps to keep you intimately united. A marriage therapist, David Cantor, said the raw talks about, when you're young and you have that raw sexuality and libido and it's just pumping, that's all great, but as you get older, that decreases. And when that young desire decreases, if it's not replaced with that deep, intimate relationship of sharing and communicating and connecting with each other on a deep level, and then you won't really have an intimate life. It's that deep sharing that keeps you feeling a need for sexual intimacy. So there's something about being known and being received that is fundamental to the experience of desire. This is really interesting. A study conducted by marriage researcher John Gottman found that emotional connection was missing element in marriages that ended in divorce. Gottman and his team videotaped, doesn't see how many couples, just couples, doesn't see how many couples, talking and interacting with each other. And researchers noted something, that couples were making bids and advances for their emotional connections. So that is like she, is trying to get his attention to get an emotional reaction from him, and doing something like, trying to engage in a conversation or hold his hand or trying to give him affection, and he's not reciprocating, or she doesn't. It could be an affectionate touch on an arm, or an expression, a look that says, I want to feel connected to you. And the quality of those bids and whether the other person responded to them determined the fate of that marriage in many cases. And so it's really interesting that husbands who eventually divorced their wives' emotional advances, 82% of the time had ignored it. So 82% of the time, husbands that got divorced, who'd left their wives, had been ignoring their emotional advances in these tapes. 82% of the time. So they were already checked out of that marriage because there was something missing in that connection. That 82% of the time they left. And so that was a big indicator that there was a problem in their marriage. And as opposed to women who later divorced their husbands, ignored their husband's bids or advances for attention 50% of the time. So when you're thinking about your marriage, you want to keep it off the rocks. Stop and talk about the problems if you're noticing that your spouse is ignoring those bids for interaction with you, right? A typical happy couple, they say, makes up to 100 bids just over the course of the dinner hour. Think about your own relationship. How often do you try to connect with your spouse? How often do you ignore? How are you about how you treat your spouse? Do you ignore or reject your spouse's attempt to connect to you? Wives, your husbands feel honored and valued and drawn to you when you bid for their connection, or when you respond to their bids. Connecting to a husband's emotion is not like talking to your girlfriends, right? Girls, we are like all emotional and talky and vulnerable with each other, but men are not like that, right? Because a lot of men grow up with a sense of, with that being that thought that if showing emotion isn't the masculine thing to do, right? So they don't know how to show emotion the same way that we do. Gary Smalley writes, in most cases. There are some cases. Gary Smalley in his book writes, Connecting with Your Husband, when a male brain is saturated in testosterone, it doesn't take much, even from a well-meaning family members, to give a boy the message that emotions and feelings are only for girls. And he talks about how his brother accidentally hit him with a baseball bat when they were kids, and his brother was like, don't cry, don't tell mom. Which I had to laugh at after having raised 3 boys. Because I remember hearing stories now as my kids are older, that like Shepherd would get hurt, and they would be like, don't tell mom, we didn't do that, nobody hurt you, don't tell mom. And so what was that message telling the kid, the little kid, right? Don't experience emotion, and don't experience it, you didn't feel it, and don't express it, you may not cry. Now I understand why he never cried in public, right? He got bit by a dog at Life Group and he didn't cry, but when we got in the car, he cried.
Unlike your husband, 2 sisters and a real emotional father.
So you show emotion.
That's a lot of emotion.
Yeah. So, okay, wives, husbands, but your husbands do experience emotion. They do it even when they are like the male who thinks it's not cool, it's not macho to show emotion. They do experience it. They just often express it in a way that doesn't make sense to us. So we have to be patient with them. They want to experience and express it. They just often don't know how to. And sometimes the best way to unlock a husband's emotions is through satisfying his sexual needs. Sometimes when they're just overly stressed and anxious or facing loss, and they just crawl into themselves, they shut down. And that's, I remember reading the book, Men Are From Mars, What Women Are From Venus, Men Are From Mars, that men just go into their cave. They have to just go into their cave. So sometimes when they're stressed, right, they just shut down. And they shut down to avoid conflict and talking. And yet doing the work to connect to him, to what he's thinking and dreaming, can bring a 180-degree change in him. And a lot of times the way to connect to him when he's shut down like that is through sex. Because why? Sexual.
Probably half an hour after the man has sex, he's
willing to talk.
He's willing to talk.
So sexual release helps him become more open.
After the nap.
After the nap.
Go ahead.
No, not the nap.
Okay, go ahead.
So what can frustrate a wife is having her husband pursue her when she's feeling disconnected or angry or preoccupied, but a husband, and she doesn't understand, we're having this conflict, and why is it that you want to connect, but you have to remember that's the way he reconnects. And then sometimes after that release, then he can have a conversation with you about what was bothering you, because regardless of what conflict you're having, then you still love each other, and you still want to meet each other's needs, and you still care for each other. So it's just love to connect with him, and remember, you're going to be rewarded because he's going to talk to you. It's reciprocal, right? So the third need is responsiveness. When a wife rejects her husband's advances, that's where she responds the way she responds to him when he wants to have sex with her, right? When a wife rejects her husband's advances, he often interprets her lack of sexual response as, I don't care about you, your needs are not important. Responsiveness is so important that 63% of the men rank that as their top need. So those 3 needs were all in over 60%. So they were also neck and neck there.
So pretty similar to women in some ways. Needs for top 3 needs for sex. The number 2 is the same.
Well, number 2 was the same connection,
right.
Yeah, but not number 3,
right.
where we're at responsiveness. Okay, so when a wife turns down her husband's sexual advance, he feels emotionally rejected. And deep down, like we said, they have emotions. They do. They're sensitive. But when a wife responds, but when she does respond to his sexual needs, then he feels loved. When she ignores or overtly rejects his need, he feels unwanted and unloved. See how important that is? It's so important, ladies, to realize the impact that you're having on your husband. And then we want to complain because they're not meeting our needs. Then we have to stop and think about what we're doing and what our actions are too, right? So, sex is, like we said, sex is a man's way of feeling close. When a wife rebuffs or ignores his sexual advances, she's sending the message she don't want to be close to him. And even though that might not be what you mean, you could just be really busy at the moment. You could have had a really stressful day with the kids or at the office. But he might not know that. And even if he does, you know how those irrational thoughts get in your head? It happens to us. It happens to me. I know it happens to other women. We get these irrational thoughts, and we know that they're not rational, but they just stew, right? And you just, anyway, but he'll get those irrational thoughts. And he doesn't, where he thinks that, she just don't want to be with me, right? She cares about the kids more than me. I'm a waste of time to her. Her to-do, everything else is more important than I am. And even though he knows that's not really true. So what you need to do, but when your husband makes a sexual advance and watches for your answer, he wants you to want him. He wants you to want him. In the song.
I want you to want
me. Yeah. Okay, anyway.
I need you to need me.
And so, in the book Love Life for Every Married Couple, Ed Wheat writes.
That's not Toby Mac.
He writes. I don't remember who that is. I just know the song with you.
Journey.
It wasn't the Journey, was it?
I don't know.
No.
Go ahead.
Journey.
Go ahead.
The Journey is, of course, Journey is not Journey, the band from the 70s.
We know that.
Okay, the husband greatly desires response from his wife. This is and she can give him this beautiful gift and delight his heart. But many wives don't seem to understand that. So to the indifferent wife, he says, in case you didn't hear me, because we were singing, Ed Wheat says in the book Love Life for Every Married Couple, to the indifferent wife, I must give this caution. When there is no physical intimacy between you and your husband, whatever emotional and spiritual closeness you have will tend to fade away as well. That is powerful.
So sad.
So let me say it again. To the indifferent wife who's always brushing off her husband's sexual advances, when there is no physical intimacy between you and your husband, whatever emotional and spiritual closeness you have had will tend to fade as well. Kevin Lehman, in his book Sheet Music, says, a sexually fulfilled husband will do anything for you. Sex is such a basic need for men that when this area is well taken care of, they feel immense appreciation and act accordingly. A sexually fulfilled man drives to work thinking, I am so glad I married that woman. I must be the happiest man alive. And then when he heads home thinking, what special thing can I do for my wife this evening?
And they'll be thinking about you all day.
What can I do for my wife this evening? So, although,
Go ahead.
So Jacob came in.
Go ahead.
So a sexually fulfilled husband will feel good about himself. And every man wants to be his wife's hero, right? So no matter what he has going on, he can be his wife's hero there. Although a wife needs tenderness beforehand, a husband often needs the release before the tenderness. So that's a little there's Jacob. A little are you on break? Are you on break?
Hello, Facebook.
Okay. A husband needs release before tenderness. So that's something we have to remember, right? We come at it from two different ways, like we've talked about before during this book. Husbands, a few things you guys have to remember about your wives' responsiveness. First, you have to remember that wives aren't just ready to go at a snap of a finger like you men are, right? Some women are the crockpot, men are the toaster, right? So what happens sometimes, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because he wants it, and then she's got to think about it, and she hasn't thought about it all day, and then he thinks that she's dragging her feet, and then he gets mad and insulted, and he's like, well, she didn't want me, and then by the time she gets to the point that she's like, oh yeah, I do want to do that, she's seeing his agitation, and she's like, well, but not with you. And so you see how that just becomes this cycle. It just becomes this cycle, and both people are disappointed in that. So take the time and give her time. You've got to stop and let her change gears, right?
Get in the mood, guys. Candlelight, rub on her, love on her, take a bath, shower. Make the mood setting. Takes time. Takes time. You love her? Take the time. Take the time.
Second, wives need to be treated with respect and honor, right? So learn what you can do to make her feel cherished and safe. That will benefit you in the long run. Third, even though men can compartmentalize and set aside unresolved issues, it's not that simple for women. Sometimes women need to clear the air beforehand. But like I said a little bit ago, women, that if it's not too serious of a disagreement, if you sometimes do it for him, he's going to be more willing to come to your side afterwards. Fourth, women sometimes have troubles, and that could be from Bye, Jacob.
Bye.
That could be from hormones, past traumas. So you just need to get professional help with that. All right. And then some insights for women, for the wives. They offer some insights about their husbands. Well, no, it's not about their husbands. Wives about themselves. So, women, if you're having any issues, you need to get professional help. If you have any issues, you need to get professional help. That's it. In any way, shape. If you have problems because you have family members in your past, you know, like your mother told you how horrible sex was, or how dirty it is, or how men just always want sex, or, you know, back in the day, women talk like that. I don't know, maybe they still do. But you need to look at sex from a biblical standpoint. Look at what the Bible says about sex. Read the Song of Solomon. It is a beautiful thing God created for marriage, created for the marriage relationship. And He created the marriage relationship, and He created the sex, and He called it good. Talk to a biblical counselor.
For married people only.
Says the marriage relationship and sex. Okay, for marriage. Okay? So what happens when a husband's sex needs are not met? What do you think?
Well, what can happen is that if the sex needs not being met, you're maybe adding temptation to him that he already maybe struggles with.
Right.
And that's maybe sex outside of marriage, and that includes porn and any other thing that he might think of. But boy,
so wives, when you understand that
Crack Clay is just trying to keep marriages together, talking about the subjects that nobody wants to talk about. Maybe that's why we're in such trouble, because people come to us a lot and say, men and women talk about this, about sex. We have men telling us women are not getting enough sex with their wives, their husbands, and with men, and we just don't understand that. We want to help marriage build a fair-proof marriage God's way.
Okay, so when sexual struggles invade a marriage, it affects both people in the relationship. It affects your self-esteem. You get cranky, defensive. You start, taking it out on each other, and it becomes just a perpetuating problem. So a wife needs to understand that when she makes only a half-hearted attempt to meet her husband with sex, he hears the messages, "I'd rather be doing 10 other things than be with you right now, and you don't do anything right. You don't attract me the way you used to." When a husband receives those messages, he feels rejected, and he may react in several ways. He may withdraw sexually and emotionally. He might not verbalize his hurt. He may just withdraw. He's feeling disrespected and disconnected, and then he may just withdraw from you. And secondly, he may become angry and resentful. When a man has a problem, a need that's unmet, he'll try to fix it, control it, or change it. If he can't, he'll pull away and go elsewhere. Now, that's not necessarily to another woman, but it could be to another woman. It could just be solitude, unresolved, and it becomes angry. Unresolved anger becomes bitterness or resentment, ultimately resulting in isolation. He may express disappointment, but he may not be able to say, "I'm disappointed," but his anger may become passive-aggressive, and he may start doing things like not cooperating, not listening to you, avoiding contact, coming home late from work with no phone call. Many of a man's emotions go through the gate of anger. Fear, frustration, irritability, sadness, rejection, hurt, usually all are expressed as anger. So when he's really angry all the time, stop and think. It's not necessarily what you did to make him mad. Did you do something or is there some reason that he's feeling fear or frustration, irritability, rejection, or hurt? Okay?
And greater is he that's in you than he that's in the world. And we can keep telling ourselves that. We can keep reading the Bible. We can study. But then when something like that is going to work and there's maybe other, people of the opposite sex there.
So number 3,
there's temptation.
He may become more vulnerable to sexual temptation. Although he may not physically cheat on his wife, he may start to fantasize about other women, right?
We've seen it happen over and over again.
Sexual fulfillment. The reality is, guys and ladies, I say guys because I have 3 sons. I've always said guys since that, but the reality is that sexual fulfillment outside of marriage is available anywhere these days, right? We are no longer, even though a husband is personally responsible and a wife, we are all personally responsible for staying faithful and maintaining sexual boundaries. However, your spouse, in this case a wife's behavior, contributes to his vulnerability to temptation. Because I think men are more susceptible to an affair. And when we're discussing men's needs, so really
but women
we're talking,
have emotional affair. Men may be susceptible to sexual affair just as much as women is susceptible to
right,
emotional
that's
affair.
True. Women are much more susceptible to emotional
Which
affairs,
is still an affair.
if their emotional needs are not being met, and men are more susceptible to physical affairs, sexual affairs.
In most cases.
In most cases. So even though a husband is, so as I'm saying, in the book, Making Sense of the Men in Your Life, Kevin Lehman writes, and I did a little post about this earlier, wives, in the 21st century, sexual disinterest on your part is flat out dangerous. Maybe in the Garden of Eden, where sexual images did not abound, sexual apathy could be managed. But this isn't the Garden of Eden, and your husband isn't living in a pure world. If you want him to be faithful, the least you can do is never give him a reason to look elsewhere. As a wife, you have great influence on your husband's sex life. When you commit to fully engage with him before, during, and after sex, you help him keep fully focused on you. Remember that. That was profound. I think that's a really good, it's a truth bomb that we all need, right? It's everywhere these days, especially with computers on your, you can look at sexual images whenever you want.
Yeah.
And we're living in a world of Tinder.
Terrible.
You can hook up whenever you want.
The
You can look
devil
at
is
sexual images. There's
tempting.
always temptation. We are not in the Garden of Eden. We're not even in the 1950s, right? Or the 70s or 60s, black and white TV.
You just open up something and something pops up.
So you can ask yourself some questions about the way you're connecting to your husband and the way he needs. Do you tell him that do you regularly tell him that he's your one and only, and you connect emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually? Do you dress provocatively for your husband's eyes, only provocatively?
Only.
And are you alert to his sexual needs? Do you initiate sex with him? Do you flirt with him, teasing him sexually, and fulfill his desires? Do you connect to his mind by discovering and affirming his thoughts, ideas, and dreams? Do you know what brings him passion? Are you willing to have fun during sex? When I see my husband guard his eyes from provocative TV or movie scenes or women in public, do I affirm his godliness and commitment to me? Do I love my husband completely and move beyond the top layer of emotion to help him understand what other feelings he may be experiencing? And do I enjoy connecting to him spiritually and reminding him that his spiritual thirst makes me want to give to him sexually? Ask yourself those questions and do a self-check there. So how do you meet your husband's sex needs? Well, one, you need to realize that sex plays a major role in helping a man process life in general. Two, say yes as much as possible. And the reality is you're not going to be able to say yes all the time, but as much as possible.
But let him know why.
But let him know. We'll get to. Okay. Three, if you say no, don't say it right away. Give him a little bit. Don't just shut him down instantly, right? Remember, it's a real need, and consider that your positive response is one that you can love and serve your husband. So don't just say no, right? It's give an honest reason for why you can't do it right now and suggest one might be at a more appropriate time, right? Decide to enjoy it. Let me say it again. Decide to enjoy sex with your husband. It starts in the mind. You can choose to enjoy it or you can choose not to. That is up to you. And what you decide determines the trajectory of your relationship. And I'm going to leave that right there. Help your spouse know how to please you. Talk to him. Tell him what you like. Get over shyness. Voice your needs. Trust him.
It's insecurity in the front, too.
Trust him. Number 7, realize that your husband's emotions may not work like yours. He's different. God created us different. He doesn't work the same way. Remember, he connects to you physically to get to the emotional. We connect emotionally to get to the physical. You got to meet him there. Take the 10% challenge. If you don't respond to your husband often now, try doing it, responding positively to him 10% more. And when you can't, then you need to think about the nature of your response and the connection that happens when you work towards anticipation. Okay, create a game plan. If you must say no,
communicate.
If you must say no, be clear about
real
why.
with each other. Be very transparent with each other. Tell each other what you like and don't like.
Right. Be clear,
If you're clear about that.
Be clear about why you can't have sex right now. Tell him when he can expect to have sex with you, and then follow up with it. Do what you say you're going to do. Follow through. Right?
Remember, men want women to enjoy as much as they enjoy. That's huge to men.
Know each other's needs, rhythms, and show empathy. So,
Because we're in a spiritual battle, guys. Just
right,
like we are.
right.
We're
Like
in a
I said,
spiritual battle.
we're not in the Garden of Eden.
The
There's
devil-
stuff everywhere.
Right. Satan wants you to have sex outside of marriage,
But when you get married, he don't want you to have
and he
sex.
don't want you to have sex in marriage.
Because that's what God
Why
designed
is
it
that?
for.
Why is
That's
that?
what God designed it for. That's going to keep you united. And our marriages should be what? It should be a reflection
Of Jesus
in the church.
and the church. The bride, us, the church, the groom, who is Jesus. And their love for each other, which is unconditional, guys. And that's what's so important in a marriage. We're showing the world what Jesus is, who Jesus is. So do it for Jesus, do it for each other, and do it for your children. Children want you to get along. They love it when you get along. We're in a spiritual battle, just like the socialists hate it that Trump is slowing down and stopping our spiral to Antichrist, to that one world government that America is the last holdout on, that the evil communism won, demonic one world government, just like it says in Revelation. But Trump is holding them back, and they hate it. It's a spiritual battle. Just like this marriage is a spiritual battle. That's why we must know Jesus as our personal Savior. We must read the Bible together with your wife. Do you read the Bible with your wife? Do you pray with your wife? I challenge you to do that. Especially now. All the time, every day. Go to Jesus first, because within ourselves, we can't do nothing on our own. We need the supernatural power of Jesus living in us to do it. That's how we can do it. Someone came in the office today, and I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "We're from Danville." I said, "Danville? What on earth would make you come up here from Danville?" Two things they told me blew my mind. One was, I heard we can trust you, and I heard you got a good reputation. Do you know where that reputation came from? Not me.
Jesus.
It's Jesus living inside me. Gives me the supernatural power to go above and beyond what man can do. It's Jesus. That's a compliment for Jesus. That's why everything we do is because of Jesus. This marriage together, she has maybe sex with me, sometimes she don't feel like it. It's because of Jesus. The supernatural power of the Holy Spirit. There's times I get home from work, I don't feel like talking to my wife for 15 minutes. But Jesus can help me do that. Okay?
Well, and I just want to say, when we read these books, thank you, darling. When we're reading these books, right, it just amazes me sometimes at the problems that go on in marriages for years and years
and people
years.
Want it to stop, but
and they don't talk about it.
Talk about it. Go to your spouse and be real.
That some of them, and I know in a lot of marriages you do talk about it, and the other person doesn't hear you or want to make a change, or they make a change temporarily and they go back to their old patterns. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in this book in particular. It has just struck me how many people were in counseling for sexual problems with these sex therapists, or marriage counseling with them, they've been married 30 years and they were scared to talk to their spouse, or 20 years scared to talk to their spouse about why they weren't having sex. Talk to each other. Have a conversation. There's a way to diplomatically have conversations about your marriage. Don't let things fester and stew. Communicate.
Read the Bible.
It's key. Communicate.
1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter. That's a good place to start for couples. But read this Bible. Okay, it's got all the answers.
And we are praying for our nation.
What does the profit
We
man
are praying for our
that gain
nation.
this whole evil world and lose its soul?
So guys,
Give your life to Jesus.
So guys, I just do want to talk about a little bit about what's going on in the world today. Is to just briefly talk about, we do need to go. We do need to go, but just briefly, how we are very sad about what happened and the lives lost and the chaos on Wednesday. It's really unfortunate that what was a very peaceful, patriotic rally, and not the first one that had been in Washington, D.C. on behalf of President Trump. There have been a number of them before the election and since the election, and they've all been peaceful. And the Trump protesters were not the ones causing the problems. And I do believe that they still were not the ones causing the problems from all of our friends who were there.
And there's a lot of emotion on both sides.
There's a lot of emotion on both sides. So from our friends who were there at the rally, they saw people who were clearly different and not the Trump people who they normally are. They were dressed different, they were vulgar, they were very different than the crowd. And they came in afterwards, and they were at the Capitol first, and they led the church in, is what we're hearing from our friends who were there.
Being
Not news stories from our friends who were there. And I'm very sorry that the state that our country has come to, I remember when I was a child growing up hearing that it was treason to talk badly about the president. I remember, I remember when you were growing up. Did you ever hear that when you were growing up? That it was so serious to say anything bad about the United States president, and that they would come and investigate you, and come to your home. And now it's like sport. It's like sport. Not only do we bash our United States president all the time, not us, but our country, our media, other lawmakers. It is in the spiritual battle, and now the censorship. Pray for our nation. Pray for our nation. There's a huge battle going on right now between evil and good that we can't see. That spiritual battle going on, we can see the results of it going on, but it is going on, and as believers,
but we still want to pray for the Pelosi's of the world.
As believers,
because Jesus can radically change her heart, like He changed mine.
Right.
14 years ago.
And the Bible says to pray.
That's what makes it miraculous. It makes it miraculous. What Jesus changed my life, He could do for you if you're not genuine, born again Christian.
So pray.
Being a Democrat, being a Republican, being a Republican Democrat is not going to get you to heaven. Only a relationship with Jesus. We got to go, guys. We got to go.
We love you. Pray for our nation.
I think it's going to be a wonderful week coming up. Pray every day. Start the day with the prayer. Go to bed praying.
Pray all day.
Okay.
Pray all day. We love you. Have a good night.